Everyone, welcome back. I'm continuing reading King of the Things by Adrian Beckingham. Just read chapter 1 and chapter 2, so now I'm continuing on chapter 3. Thanks for coming back and listening. It's great to be connected to you all. Chapter 3 The Feast and the Furniture. Soon afterwards, school was out. The summer holidays had arrived. Hunch was so pleased. Not only had he passed his exams, this was good enough, believe me, but even better, he had 6 glorious weeks away from school. He was not so pleased about the summer job that he'd landed for himself, or rather that his parents had landed for him. Hunch was growing older now, and his parents felt it would do him good to try his hand at working for a living. Tax's dad had spoken to Hunch's father and said, "We will give your lad a job for the summer. He won't earn much, you understand, but it will get his foot through the door. Tax tells me Hunch is good with his hands. We are soon to be holding the village dance. Hunch could help us make some decorations." Hunch tried to warn them. Any scheme dreamed up by Tax was bad news for him, but his parents thought the job was a great idea. Hunch soon learned what Tax was up to. His parents were making sure Tax had all sorts of dance lessons. He learned how to do the foxtrot and the full moon walk, and even the woodcutter's chop. Tax, of course, wanted Hunch around for one reason: cannon fodder. The lessons were in the same barn where the village dance was to be held, and that was where Hunch had to work. Tax kept trying to pull Hunch into the dancing, not to make him feel included, to show himself off to Hunch. Hunch felt such a fool. If he said he did not want to dance, people sniggered and thought him a coward. If he tried, the weight of his stoop made him stumble about like a giddy parrot with broken wings. Tax and the others howled with laughter. So Hunch worked the woods the best he could, and his best was very good. The plan had been for Hunch to make little wooden decorations for the ball, but seeing how well Hunch worked the wood, the plan soon changed. Hunch was given long planks of timber from the trees that Tax had felled. Hunch showed spectacular skill at sawing, chiseling, hammering, nailing, and polishing the wood. Soon they moved him from the barn and into a large shop that Tax's parents owned on the high street. Out the back was a little workshop, and the first thing they had Hunch make was a sign carved into a large slice of tree cut down by Tax, chiselled by Hunch's own skilful hands. The sign read, "Tax the Axe's Furniture Shop." Hunch did not want to work in that shop. If only he had a friend by his side. One evening he put Quiz into his woven stick work chair and tried to carry her into the village. But as they approached the cluster of houses and shops, she leapt out and scampered away. She did not want to be around lots of people. She did not like village noise and bustle. Hunch did not want her to be unhappy, so he let her run away. He would see her soon enough, back by the edge of the forest, but now he would work alone. To make the days go faster, Hunch worked busily in the workshops at the back of the little shop in the centre of the village. He crafted tables, chairs, wardrobes, candlesticks, fruit bowls, chopping boards, and even garden dragons. Now you may be thinking, making all that furniture must take a lot of trees, and you know that Hunch loved the forest. But for every tree that Tax chopped down, Hunch planted 2 new saplings. Tax sold Hunch's handmade furniture at such a handsome price in Tax the Axe's Furniture Shop that the young woodcutter had bought his family the largest house in the village. Tax knew Hunch had no head for sums. He lived in a world of riverbanks and squirrels. Tax never stopped smiling. The poorer he kept the hunchback, the richer he got himself. One day the woodcutter came up with a plan to make himself even richer. Why not turn the village dance into a feast? He would invite everyone in the village, of course, and everyone in the surrounding villages as well. He wished to show off his fine tables and chairs. When they were full of food and merry, the guests would open their purses and spend their money. Tax called the village scribe, whose job it was to write important messages by hand. The woodcutter dictated carefully and slowly to the scribe. The scribe wrote each word speedily yet elegantly down onto long rolls of parchment. When done, the message read, "You are invited to the village of Taxi Axe. When the moon is next full, come along for the greatest feast ever. You shall enjoy food and wine, music and dancing and stories, with the loveliest furniture in all the land and to rest upon. Everyone is invited." The scribe read the finished notice back to the woodcutter, who nodded thoughtfully. Then the young woodcutter said, "One last thing to add, scribe." The scribe's delicate fingers danced upon the shaft of the pen, which in turn danced upon the paper and wrote exactly what the woodcutter said. "The food and wine and entertainment is free, but the furniture isn't. Sample the wares, no obligation, but bring your purses and bring 'em full to avoid disappointment." Tax dropped a pile of copper coins, which he'd taken from Hunch's coat pocket, into the scribe's hand. It's not good, is it? "Now get busy and copy this message out 100 times. Nail it to trees, benches, lampposts, doors, all about the village and towns and beyond." Now the woodcutter's statement, "Everyone is invited," was not quite true. For Tax had forgotten someone. Without even giving a thought, you can already guess who had slipped his mind, can't you? You're right. That same sorry soul, whose skill it was Tax hoped to profit from. After all, the sight of horrid Hunch might scare off the customers. Hunch first came across the message on a sign nailed to the tree beside the bridge. He sat there for a while on the river bank. Quiz jumped nimbly about his knees as he read it. The notice said, "Everyone is invited," thought Hunch. The idea of a feast was enticing. People in the village had never liked him much, but by the sounds of it, people might be coming from other towns and villages as well. There would be food and stories and dancing and music. Well, he could stay out of sight for the dancing. Hunch knew his parents hated large crowds, so they would not even think of going, and Quiz was scared of the people, so he would have to go alone. Taking courage, he decided that he must swallow his fear and give it a go. The notice said the feast would be held when the moon was full, and so it was that Hunch watched earnestly each night as the moon grew from a slim sliver of winking light into a blossoming globe. On the evening of the feast, Hunch put on his finest trousers and his best shirt. I reckon that's a picture of it. He pulled out a smart waistcoat he'd been given at one birthday but never worn. It pulled too tight across his hump and made him look even more disfigured, but he wanted to wear his best clothes as a sign of respect. He took some scissors and cut a thin line in the waistcoat thread across the back, just above his shoulder. This allowed it to slip more easily across his back. He brushed his hair and even added a little oil to flick his fringe out and hold it in place. He looked into the mirror and frowned. Ugly, he thought. I'm all bent up like a cabbage." This took a lot of courage. You can see now how brave he had to be. In the village barn, with its high stone walls and tall thatched roof, a table had been set with 101 chairs. Each of these chairs was different to the next. Hunch had lovingly and carefully crafted each one of them with his own hands. The long tabletop gleamed with the smoothness of the carefully sawn and planed and polished wood. Every item had been created by Hunch. Wooden bowls and cups waited eagerly to be filled. Elegant candlesticks holders waited to be lit with the onset of the night, still some hours away. A stillness of calm hung in the air, and each of the items that made up this festive table, from the wooden bowls and the cups to the candle holders and the tables and chairs, everything had a price tag attached. A little crass, perhaps, but you must remember, after all, that the evening was Tax's idea, and all he was interested in was making a healthy profit. He never gave the slightest thought to the fact that everything had been made by Hunch. It was all part of Taxiax's furniture shop. The young woodcutter rubbed his hands together in eager anticipation. The musicians arrived, followed by the dancing girls, in a bustle of giggles and frills. Then the first of the guests arrived. They appeared in such numbers that the roar of their merry voices filled the barn. The band struck up a lively jig as Tax the woodcutter stood back and watched everything with an eager eye, licking his dry lips. His heart was beating a little faster than usual. He saw every face in the village was there. Well, all except one, but he barely noticed that. There were also many people he did not recognize, who had come from miles away. Tax smiled a nervous smile. How much would these festive folks spend? They were in for a fine night that they would remember. He hoped that by the time they left, the barn would stand silent and empty. Empty not just of people and food, stories and music, but also of the furniture and cups and bowls the people now used in the feast. Tax sniffed and held up his nose as a few stragglers arrived. A man and a woman with 3 children, an old gentleman with a walking stick, accompanied by a small terrier dog on a lead. There were only 5 empty seats left at that great long table. Then 4, then 3, then 2, then 1. 100 seats filled. Tax waved his hands, and instantly, as if from nowhere, a small army of cooks appeared, carrying between them towering wooden platters, bundled high with cheese, steaming warm bread, pies, pastries, cakes, and flans. 2 mighty wild boars were carried in on long poles, still sizzling from the roasting on the spits, snouts open, as if in silent protest. Next came a team of waiters carrying Hunch's wooden serving pots, piled high with fire-roasted potatoes and glazed carrots dug up this very day, fresh from the fields. Corks were popped with a sound like gunfire. Wine poured in golden streams from the uncorked stems into long wooden cups made by Hunch's own hands. Into the barn walked Hunch, in his polished boots, with his white, neatly buttoned shirt and his carefully cut and threaded waistcoat, worn in a pointless attempt to hide his hump. In one hand he carried his staff, a finely crafted length of twisted hazel that helped him carry his unscented weight. In the other hand he held a small leather pouch of copper coins. After all, the posters had told everyone to bring some money along. Hunch's eyes opened wide at the sight before him. The gleam of the candlesticks and the shine of the table, the wide wooden platters piled high with breads, cheeses, pasties, roast potatoes, and delicious pies. But Hunch was only interested in one thing: finding Tax the woodcutter. As he caught his eye, Hunch walked towards him awkwardly. Crossing the length of the hall, he offered a hand to shake and say, "Well done," and give his thanks for the invitation. Tax's eyes flashed and his cheeks flushed a brilliant red as he stared hard at the hunchback. "Get out!" he hissed and shouted. Hunch was caught by surprise. "But the invitation said everyone is invited." "That hardly means you," spluttered Tax, as he almost spat out the words, unable to contain his anger. Hunch felt his heart sink. With all the work he'd been doing for the shop, Hunch had dared to think that Tax had become his friend. Time seemed to freeze as Hunch stood there, open-mouthed, with one hand frozen, stretched forward in friendship, and the other trembling on the hilt of his staff. The eyes of the woodcutter flashed in anger. "This is a very important evening," he snarled. "I need these good folk who have come from near and far to be merry. I want them to buy now and come back to purchase more later. One look at you and they will turn their stomachs." He pointed one stern finger at the door. "Out!" he roared. That's the end of chapter 3. I'll read you chapter 4 in the next instalment. I hope you've been enjoying. Let's love.